Our guest on this podcast is Arsh Ellahi from Wolverhampton, who in his early 20s got involved in his father's property business, built that to quite a substantial business, including a £1 million profit deal that he did to Aldi, then almost losing everything in 2008. Then went on to rebuild that business and restructure the debt that he had to now end up with a £50 million portfolio with about 1,100 tenants. An amazing journey of how he went from boom to almost bust and back again. So let's head on straight into the podcast.
When I left university, I went to my dad. He turned around and said, "Son," he goes, "you're degree educated now, what do you want to do?" I said, 𝗍𝗲𝗁𝗁 𝗠𝗲𝗁𝗍. And just imagine now, we've all seen the film 𝗍𝗲𝗁𝗁. He just gave me that look and the finger came out and that was it. And so the fact that you're laughing knows that you know what the finger means. Yeah, and he goes, "Son," he goes, "I just need help in the property space." I lost twice, I think. I lost a property business and also personal relationships. Until that date, that's never been repaired. I reached that multiple times, and to a point where they washed their hands of it. They just said, "You know what, that's it, Arsh, you deal with it." So in actual fact, I've lost 3 times. I've lost the business, I've lost personal relationships, and I've now picked up a massive debt. And this is a part where, I think me and you spoke briefly earlier, this is the part that no one likes talking about, the part where they've failed.
Arsh, you're quite well known in the property space. You've been in property nearly 25 years now, coming up to 25 years. You don't look old enough, to be honest, so you're doing something well. Quite a common knowledge, sizable portfolio, about 1,100 tenants in the Wolverhampton kind of space. But in 2008, almost everything kind of nearly collapsed. We're going to get into that in a moment. But gone on now, probably about £50 million property portfolio that you have. So let's take us back to the beginning. How did you get started in property in 2000?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the couch. I want to call this the couch, the property couch. And the reason that I got involved in property, when I went to university, I was actually quite good at DJing, believe it or not. Okay. Really random fact that I really like music. And when I left university, I went to my dad. And he turned around and said, "Son," he goes, "you're degree educated now, what do you want to do?" I said, "Dad, to be fair, at that point I was DJing around the world." I said, "I fancy DJing." And just imagine now, we've all seen the film 𝗍𝗲𝗁𝗁. He just gave me that look. And the finger came out and that was it. And so the fact that you're laughing knows that you know what the finger means. Yeah, and he goes, "Son," he goes, "I just need help in the property space." Because his background was all engineering. So when he came over from Pakistan back in the late 60s, he just worked in an engineering factory and slowly worked himself to build his own factory. And then the profits that he took from that, he started buying just ad hoc, really. Right. There was no strategy behind it, but he bought a few properties. And that kind of followed through to the strategy as how he managed them. Never really chased up on tenants, never really chased up on rents. Tenants were paying in arrears, tenants were running off on paydays. Right. So I kind of bought in a whole strategy and streamlining that business. Okay. So that's how I really got involved in property. And that's how even though I've been involved in property 25 years full time, you could say that pretty much I've been a landlord since the age of 4. Because whilst other kids, I was brought up in quite strict upbringing in terms of a Muslim household. So education was always kind of like on a back foot. Yeah. So I used to go to school during the day. In the evening, I used to go to a Muslim school. Yeah. And then after that, I used to go and help my dad with the maintenance on the properties. On the weekend, I would spend Saturday and Sunday at the engineering factory. Okay. And there's no health and safety. I wasn't wearing steel toe caps here. Yes. I was literally in shorts, and then there was steel flying all over the place. I wasn't wearing glasses. So I've literally brought up on the school of hard knocks. So it's been an interesting journey. So off the back of streamlining his property business, me and 2 other brothers, we got involved in, we started looking at what else we could do in terms of the property portfolio. There's no debt against it. And you and I both now know the power of leverage. Yeah. So we went to a bank and said, "Guys, we've got this small portfolio of properties. Let's just imagine that back then they're worth a couple of £1 million. They would leverage and they lent us the full £2 million for us to go off and buy other stock, because back then finance was a lot easier to get hold of. and we all talk about the good old days of Mortgage Express, but we had banks like Barclays, Lloyds, Allied Irish, RBS, we had HSBC, we had all of them lining up to give us funding. So funding wasn't an issue back in 2000 to 2008. And we started building, we had a small plot of land and we built 2 houses.
So this is you and your younger brother?
Yeah, no, I'm the youngest, believe it or not. I'm the one.
I thought it was you were.
Yeah, everyone always says that. My brother, who I'm involved in property with now, everyone says that he seems younger. He's just had the easy side of the bit. Yeah, he had the downhill paper round. I had the uphill paper round. And what happened was that we built these houses on land that we already owned. Okay. So we were leveraging the assets that we already had. Yes. And then we sold those. Right. They went really well. And then my dad thought, okay, yeah, you've done something okay. He still had a hand on the purse strings, wouldn't relinquish that control. Yes. And then off the back of that, we then, down the road, still in Wolverhampton, we bought a derelict block of apartments. And we got planning permission to flatten that. And we built a block of 24 apartments. They're called Tetnall Gate on the Tetnall Road opposite the Connaught Hotel. And we built those and we sold them and made best part of £1 million just on those on that development alone.
And probably what, mid-20s at that point?
Yeah, at that point, circa 23, 24. Okay.
Well, a young guy in the business.
Young guy. And you've got to remember that when things are starting to go well for you, yeah, a bit of arrogance kicks in. A bit of cockiness kicks in. Yes. And we were young guys and we were making decent money. And then we started to think that we had the Midas touch. Do you ever get that approach?
Absolutely, yeah.
Everyone gets that. Yeah. It's very easy. Yeah. And then more land, we started to get a bit of press coverage and people started to take note. Yes. And then land started coming to us in all different directions. As we bought more sites, the team started to grow. We started to employ an MD, we had a finance director, we had a group of architects working for us directly, we had our own legal team, we had our land team. So we built a significant team of people. Now, ultimately, each of these people on decent salaries. Yeah. And we built up a massive overhead. I don't mind saying that because this is the reality of building a business. You yourself, you talked about how many people work within your team. And part of me, when I sat there listening to it, I thought, I don't miss that at all. I don't miss payday on the first of the month, you seeing, X amount of thousands of pounds disappear. We were talking hundreds of thousands of pounds that we're paying out every year just on overheads, not to mention finance costs, not to mention holding land costs. And so slowly but surely, we started building. So we finished that development of 24 apartments there. Then we built in Albury. Then we built again back in Wolverhampton. We had a site in Kidderminster. We had a site in Bromsgrove. And some of these
stretch out a little bit in terms of
start to stretch out. And then all these developments come with all different kinds of, let's say, dynamics. Some were housing schemes, some were development schemes, some were apartment schemes, some were mixed use schemes. And it was an interesting time because, again, banks were just, oh, you've got that piece of land there. Oh, you haven't got planning yet, but you're intending to get planning for 24 houses. We'll give you the full cost to buy the land.
Pre kind of 2007, 2008.
2007, they were throwing the money. It was literally a phone call. It wasn't even an application anymore. Phone call to the bank manager or to the underwriting team and saying, guys, it's in this land. Here's what it is now. Here's what it become. Here's what we think the value is now. Here's what we think the end gross development value is. What do you reckon? They were giving us the funds. Everything was there. But as they say, what goes up must come down. So in my book, Boom, Bust and Back Again, I went through that whole journey. Yeah. There was one highlight of the development journey that will always stay with me. It's that the fact that we bought a car showroom. It was a Mitsubishi car showroom. Is Mitsubishi still a thing?
Yeah, I think they're still around.
Yeah, okay. So it was a Mitsubishi car showroom in Wolverhampton, in Finchfield. And we went off and got planning permission. I think back then, it was 24 or 28 exclusive 4-bed homes. So they're going to be a nice development. And we were just about to put spade into the ground.
So planning approved, everything granted.
Planning,
ready to start
everything was
building.
granted, everything ready to start. We get a call from Lidl, and they said, "You interested in selling the site?" They go, "Well, your offer is going to have to be substantial in order for us to accept this because we're ready to start." And they said, "Well, we'll do you a subject to planning deal." We said, "Not interested. We couldn't, because how long is your planning permission going to take? Well, it's taken us X amount of time to get to this point already. We don't want to wait any further." And then within the space of a couple of days, they came back to us with an unconditional offer,
Right.
which meant that they had to buy it as it is,
No condition.
no conditions, here's your money. And they had to wrap it up within a month.
Right.
And they came back to us with the same offer as if we were building out the site
Yes.
and the same amount of profit.
Yeah.
So just imagine that our profit on that deal, let's say it was £1 million. They came to us with a check where we had the site money back plus £1 million profit.
Yes.
We stood there with a check like that. We thought it's too good to be true. And again, this only ticked off a little box in our brain to say we're untouchable.
Yes.
And it happens. Every developer has this little win where they then think that they're untouchable. But as I said, what goes up must come down. And we got to a point 2007, 2008 where the market started to simmer, cool off. And then all of a sudden, we see that the values of the properties are dropping. So if our profit margin in a property is, let's say, 20 to 25% in a development, which is average nowadays, our properties were being downvalued by 30 to 35%, which means that for every property we were building, we were losing 10%. On top of that, of our overheads, all of a sudden it was depleting. Our cash reserves were literally depleting by the minute.
Yeah. And bank attitudes changed.
The bank's attitude, and we saw the bank's attitude change. And that when we were still acquiring sites, we still had sites in acquisition, still had sites in legals, and it started to become a little bit more interesting. More important, we started to get calls from the banks. Everything okay? How are you getting on with this site?
Yes.
And it got to a point where we were just over leveraged. We were far too over leveraged. Let's just imagine we bought the site for £1 million. Now the bank was valuing that at circa 500,000, which meant that
market conditions have changed, values had fallen.
Exactly.
Lending criteria changed. So all of a sudden, where they lent you £1 million
Correct.
for that site, it's actually now only worth 500.
Correct. So we had to have some really difficult conversations. And part of the leverage was my parents' portfolio, which was what kind of caused me a bit of an issue. Because
that was the original properties your parents had acquired.
Correct, which had no debt on it. And we use that as collateral. We use that as leverage. And then they turned around and they said, "Arsh, okay, well, we understand we've lent you this. We also understand that we've got security of this. How about if we just take this?" But even then, that was not going to cover the debt. So we had to come up with this restructure program. And this was a really, really tough, difficult time. Now you've got to think that you've spent the best part of 8 years building a business that's worth tens of millions of pounds. We've lost how much? You've got to remember, we still put in X amount, I think it's £8 million worth of personal money into these. And for it to be wiped out within the space of days. It's
not easy.
It's not an easy pill to swallow. So from then start seeing that companies are now writing to you to say that we're taking back your cars that you got on lease, and then come and taking them off the driveway, for then now getting to a point where you're almost questioning everything that you've done in life, is quite interesting. I've been in those dark moments, literally, where everything comes crashing down. So part of it, we lost. Professional relationship is one thing, but personal relationships for me is far greater. And out of the two brothers, one of them decided not to talk to us. No, not talk to me, should I say. Don't know why me. Well, I do know, because off the back of that, we were always looking for the next thing. So after the developments, my brother came to me and says, "Oh, you're still creditworthy." He goes, shall we go and buy these industrial sites where we've got industrial where, let's say it's worth, for argument's sake, we can buy it for £500,000. We can have it now re-leveraged back at £1 million, which means that it's not going to cost us anything to own it. I said, well, yes, it is. So there was lessons that I learned then, but they still hadn't learned of over leverage. And I refused to take that risk. And as a result, that kind of become almost like a bit of a personal battle.
Right. Factor the personal relationships.
Factor in the personal relationships. And so not only did I lost twice, I think. I lost a property business and also personal relationships. Until that date, that's never been repaired.
Right. So the one in brother you still don't.
Yeah, well, I've reached out multiple times. I reached out multiple times, and to a point where they washed their hands of it. They just said, you know what, that's it, Arsh, you deal with it. So in actual fact, I've lost 3 times. I've lost the business, I've lost personal relationships, and I've now picked up a massive debt. So going back to the point, and this is a part where I think me and you spoke briefly earlier. This is the part that no one likes talking about. The part where the failed.
Tough times, where things go wrong.
The failures. So I had to sit in a board meeting with the directors from Lloyds, Allied Irish, RBS, Yorkshire Bank. And they're just 4 that I can remember off the top of my head. And we said, guys, okay, we've got 2 options. You can either take the portfolio and you're still going to be in negative equity. There's no way that portfolio is worth what we owe you.
Yeah, because what they would do, they would take it and then just dump it in a market where there's very few buyers.
Correct.
So they'd achieve very little from that.
Correct. And so I said, you're still going to be in negative. I said, or we can do a workaround. We can do a workaround where, because let's face it, we were probably leveraged at that point 200%.
Okay. So the borrowing was way over the value of the property.
Way over. And this is, they've got to take some responsibility for that, because the way they were throwing...
Irresponsible lending came from.
Irresponsible lending.
It was a case of, like you said, would you ring them up, how much do you need?
Yeah.
It was agreed.
And literally, if we had that conversation in the morning, by tomorrow morning, that money would have been in our bank. That's how easy it was for us to get lending. For someone watching this now, they'd never get that today. You know, some people are doing a refinance still 6 months later, they're still waiting for their funds. We were having money in within 24 hours. So I had to have this conversation. And my brother said, and my brother, my parents, I sat down with them and said, guys, here's the situation. I'm the only one creditworthy here. And my dad said, you know what, Arsh, he goes, let it go. He goes, just let it go. We'll start again, we'll figure out a way. My other brother said, let it go. We'll start and we'll figure out a way. We'll go and get a job, but we'll do this. And I was the only person that literally said, I'm not ready to throw in the towel. And Chad, you probably know a lot more property people than I do. I consider myself a bit of an introvert, shall we say, in property. How many people at that point, if you're 200% leveraged, would you have thrown in the towel, or would you have come back and said, you know what, let's fight?
Yeah, I think most people at that point would just not pursue it any further. They'd just say, just let it go.
Yeah, I would say 99% of people. And I suppose this is kind of what makes me different. I turned around and said, you know what, guys, I'm ready for the fight.
What do you think drove that? Do you think it was something inside that's to wanted to prove differently, or
yes.
You could see a glimmer of hope, you could see a solution?
There was no glimmer of hope. I'll be honest, it was on a wing and a prayer. And more importantly, probably personal pride.
Yeah.
Personal pride. Can you imagine all the headlines that we were hitting? You know, anyone can research Arsh Ellahi, anyone can research Bentley Homes. You can see all the headlines that are still there today. Went bust. It was a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to add further fuel to the fire. And what happened is that I turned around to some guys, okay, here's where we are. I'm prepared to take on the debt, personally. And they go, what does that look like? So that over-leveraged portfolio, let me restructure it. Let me restructure the finance. over 17 years. At the time, I was 27/28. And I said to them, guys, let me restructure the finance over 17 years. Guys looked at me over the table and said, this guy's crazy because he wants to pay us back what we owe and we're still going to be making more money on the interest over 17 years. If you were a banker and you were sat there, you would think that all your Christmases have come at once, because now you've got two options. You can either go and put it into auction and take a loss, and what they call in the industry, take a haircut. Or this guy who's going to put himself on the line now for the next 17 years, where he's going to start to pay down debt from X amount of million to zero. Yeah. So we did it on a full-on capital repayment, 17-year plan. As a banker, which one would you choose?
Yeah, the repayment makes much more sense.
So,
hey, if you're enjoying this podcast right now, I've got some great news for you. You probably already learned from Arsh right now. His journey started with finding fantastic deals. The same as myself, being able to find these deals, negotiate them and sell them on for a profit, got us a kickstart to create the cash flow to be able to start building our businesses. Today, I still think this is the key and most important skill. The great news is that we have a program called the Deal Finder Intensive, which is an intense program where we focus on the skills of finding opportunities, negotiating those deals, getting them secured and selling them on for a profit. To find out more about the program and join the waiting list, make sure you click on the link below and I'll put a description just here for you. Now let's get back into the podcast.
I sat down, there's only one guy that believed in me at that meeting. This guy, I don't mind saying, his name's Mike, he works for Lloyd's, still a really good friend, and I probably owe him so much because he said, he made me exit the room, and he sat down with that board of other bankers and he goes, guys, so what Lloyd's did, Lloyd's bought that debt off everyone else.
Okay.
And Lloyd's backed me. I'm thinking about this, and I've just got goosebumps just thinking about that meeting, because for me, that was a life-changing meeting.
Yeah.
No one really.
It could have gone.
It could have gone either way. It could have gone literally just looking at the goosebumps on my arms now, thinking what happened that day. Don't know who was looking over me, but everything happens for a reason, right? So Mike came back. He goes, Arsh, he goes, I'm now the person you owe the money to. Everyone else will structure a deal with, and I will do that with them. But you now owe me, or Lloyd's.
Yes.
And he goes, Arsh, just out of curiosity, why 17 years? He goes, I could have stretched you out 20 or 30 years. Why 17? I said, Mike, I don't want to be your slave for the next 30 years. I know I could have stretched you out 30 to 40 years because you can get lending up to 65 to 70 years old. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
I said, I don't want to be your slave for the next 35 years. So I said, but he goes, you're going to put more pressure on me. He said, no. I said to him, it's going to give you focus for 17 years. And he goes, have you got a plan? I said, I've got a plan. And so 17 years, I structured it to the 11th of November, 2025. 11:59 p.m. He goes, oh, you're pretty certain on that date? I said, I am. I said, come midnight, and we hit the 12th of November 2025, I turned 45. And I literally want to become completely debt-free.
So you'll have repaid all that debt down by the time you're 45 next
45.
year.
So as we record this now, I'm 43. So we'll record this in June 2024. So come November 2025, I'm completely debt-free.
So over that time, not only have you been paying the debt down, so the equity starts building up, but the values have been going up as well.
Yeah.
So that portfolio is probably worth significantly more than it was when you were in that boardroom at that time.
Yeah.
Today, even though the debt's been paid down, it's worth way, way more as well.
You got to remember, I've probably paid way over the odds for that portfolio. I could have let that portfolio burn.
Yeah.
And I could have probably bought it back for half the value out of receivership. And perhaps that probably would have what the smart person would have done.
From a financial point of view, that could have made more sense. But it was the pride that was driving it.
I would have had no control over that. I would have had no control over, if they took the property, that property portfolio is then out of my control.
it's not just the portfolio at that time that would have wiped you out, I'm guessing, because they would have come for you for the rest of the money as well.
Absolutely. So I would have been on.
Else is on the hook.
Absolutely. So again, is it the right thing to do from a business point of view? Looking at it now, 16 years later, yes. Have I saved everyone else in the process? Absolutely, yes. I've cleaned up the book as we speak today, probably geared around 2.5%, 3%, going from 200% leverage to 3%.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about the school of hard knocks, I've been there. I've literally done that. So what did I do? I suppose, listening to this, everyone likes hearing the backstory. What did I do to recoup that? So as I said to you just before this interview, I had to go back to grassroots. Yeah. Forget the developments, forget the shiny penny.
Because now you have to service this debt.
Yep. Yeah. So I've now put my neck on the line for 17 years. I've signed a document to say, Arsh, basically, your ass is with Lloyds for 17 years. You're not going anywhere for 17 years. Anytime you breathe, we want to know about it. So I've still got this great relationship with Mike. And believe it or not, it's worked extremely well. Well, it's extremely well. There've been times where I've thought, flipping heck, I'm working just to pay the debt. Yeah. There's been no excess cash flow. So what have I had to do? First of all, went back to grassroots. So I built, my brother, the one brother that survived the catastrophe, shall we say, we built a letting agency. And you guys might think of this as a rent-to-rent. And as I said to you, we created a completely new concept where we were acting as a letting agency. We were offering the landlord a full market rent, but we were utilising the LHA strategy, the local housing allowance, or for those that know it now, the universal credit or the housing benefit. We're utilising the multi-generational strategy to generate additional cash flow. So let's just imagine back then, a 3-bedroom house was being rented for, let's say, £500 a month. Utilising the LHA strategy, we knew that we could get a family paying circa between £800 to £1,000 a month.
Yeah, because the family was entitled to a certain amount of
absolutely
benefit, as it were.
Correct.
And then by them taking that property on, you can still accept that higher amount. So you're creating a buffer of profit.
And that was our commission.
Right.
It was deemed as commission because it wasn't a guaranteed rent. It was like a letting agency with an element of rent to rent, but without the rent to rent.
Yeah, because you weren't, as you said, you weren't guaranteeing that payment.
Correct.
Because the last thing you want to do is take on more financial.
Correct. I was very clear that we were going to be very clear about what our commitments were.
Because once you've been through a process where you had so much financial pain, you're going to be much more cautious taking anything else on that could potentially be a problem.
Absolutely. So we built up a portfolio very quickly of 100 odd landlords, where each one was paying, the commission was anywhere between 400, and some of the commissions were like £1,000, depending on the size of the family, and so again, that was really interesting. But that came with its challenges as well. You're dealing with a lot of people on benefits.
Yes.
And as you know, that the benefit system has changed multiple times throughout that process. We've gone from housing benefit to local housing allowance to now to universal credit, where where the tenants are being paid direct,
rather than the money for the rent.
So previously the rent would come directly to us as the landlord or the agent. Now it's going to a person on benefits to them. So I was the first landlord in the UK to challenge it. I was the first landlord in the UK to ask for my tenants only to be paid by cheque and not bank transfer. And it was interesting. And they kept saying to me, Arsh, why do you want your tenants to be paid by cheque? I said, because cheque is not a liquid asset. They go, what do you mean by that? I said, in order for them to go and liquidise this cheque, they have to go to cash converters. And that is a task in itself. Do you mind if I tell you a little bit of a story? This part, again, 99% of the people listening to this, and I would never want you to have this headache. So I had to have some really interesting conversations with the head of Royal Mail. Because it makes me laugh that this was part of the journey, and this is part that I'm quite thankful for, because all this has led me to where I am today. Now, can you imagine, let's say 200 tenants were receiving checks of £500, £600, £700. And no, sorry, it would have been they would have been paid every fortnight back then. So every 2 weeks on a Monday, I had a sheet of 100 or 200 people who were expecting checks. Right. And on top of that, I had another spreadsheet from Royal Mail telling me when to expect the postman at that address. So let's just say number 1, ABC Street. I knew the postman was going to be there at between 10 past and 9:30. So we devised, between me and my brother, a plan and a team of drivers to go and sit within those locations. So the moment so I had a conversation with Royal Mail and says, the moment you approach one of our post workers, we will no longer work with you. Right. So I had to imagine this is the front door here, Saj. Imagine there's a gate. Yeah. We had to let the postman go, open the gate, walk to the door, walk out, close the gate. Only then could we go and knock on that door. Okay. And the tenant, interfering with the we would knock on the door. Mr. Tenant, I think your rent check has just been posted. Yeah. I was the first landlord in the UK to go and get third-party authorization to be able to receive that check back off the tenant, where they sign the back of it, and I could then present that to the bank. Right.
That's crazy. I remember that's probably around the time we probably first met. As your business starting to evolve, I was hearing about this stuff, and I've not heard anybody else doing this kind of thing before.
Honestly, it was. I would have sleepless nights on Sundays.
Just trying to imagine collecting that many checks, getting them signed, getting them into the bank. I said most people would not do that. It'd be a case of it's just too much.
Ask me to do it today. I'd say no chance. No chance. And you got to remember,
at that time you had a strong reason why you needed to get this done.
We had to do this. We had a few tenants that figured out what the back door was for. Mm-hmm. So as we posted it through the front door, they would be out the back door, and we would have someone standing outside the cash converters. Yeah. Crazy. Mm. But it worked. Oh, Mr. Tenant, don't you live at number 1 Duncan Street? Yeah, I do. Is that my rent check that you got there that you're just about to go and cash? Yeah, I think it is. Do you want to just sign it and hand it over? Yeah. We had a few people that cashed it, paid, and for them it was Christmas every day. Every 2 weeks it was like Christmas.
Yeah, some people got access to money that they weren't expecting. There's not there, they don't care.
So it's crazy. So anyway, let's move forward. On top of that, I started doing what I was really good at, was deal sourcing. So as well as now have this agency, I now started to build a second recurring income, which is deal sourcing.
This is finding deals,
packaging them up. And this is something that I used to do whilst we had the development company. Okay. So I owned a company I still do own a company called We Buy Properties Fast. What do you reckon we do, Saj? We Buy Properties Fast. And again, some of my marketing strategies, I think, have been fantastic and we still use today. So one of my most memorable marketing strategies was that in Wolverhampton, you've got the Wolverhampton Wanderers football ground. And then you've got one of the UK's largest Asda's opposite. So every week on a Saturday, you would have tens of thousands of people coming to this Asda. And right opposite was the Wolverhampton Wanderers car park. And I approached Asda and said, guys, can I put some signage up in your car park? They said, no chance. I went to Wolverhampton Wanderers. I said, guys, if I pay, can I have a massive billboard facing the Asda exit? Yes. How much are you going to pay us, Arsh? I said, I'll tell you what, I'll take some boards in the ground and I'll take some boards outside the ground. Cost, let's say back then, let's say 20 grand a year. Nothing. 2 grand a month. Nothing. The amount of calls that we took on Saturdays, we actually opened up high street presence in Wolverhampton city centre. So when people were calling us as they came out to Asda, and my message was very clear. We buy property and land for cash. Can we buy yours? Yes. That was it. We buy property and land for cash. Can we buy yours? Everyone come out of Asda. They would call us. Oh, we see that you're just coming out of Asda. Our office is 2 minutes down the road. You know, tell you what, come here. I'll get the kettle on, and you can come and have a chat with us. I employed an English gentleman named John, early 50s, bold, short. He was employed to sit there, talk to these people, almost into submission. Once they walked in, we knew we had them.
That's great footfall there, and nice audience. I was actually at a university. We used to live close to that Asda when they were building that Asda a few years ago now. And you see how property prices have evolved, and the message like that, when you've got such a footfall, it's only a small number of people that need to respond to make it viable.
We were converting 30 people a month.
Wow.
And we decided not to buy back then. And we were literally trading them. I've gone through the whole evolution of deal sourcing to the point now where I've actually got my own mobile application called the Property Investor app. So let's just imagine, Saj, that now you've just come out of Asda. You come to me at our office, High Street Presence. John has sat down with you. We've negotiated a deal with you in principle on paper. We're probably even going back in the car with you, in your car, back to your house. And that's what John used to do. He was paid to drink their coffee, eat their biscuits, listen to their stories, deal done.
Get the deal done.
Get the deal done. Off the back of that, you come back to the Arsh deal done, sign contract, boom. Next thing that I would do, we would either, back then we didn't have emails, and so emails was quite early on. We would text message all the investors that we had in our database. Guys, house is worth 100 grand. We've agreed 70. Our fee is 5 grand. Who wants it?
Yes.
People come to our office, drop 5 grand to us, take the contracts, and off they go.
Yeah, and back in the day, that's how a lot of deal sourcing was done. You agree the deal, you get a contract sent to a solicitor, and somebody else just steps in and takes on and completes that.
Absolutely. So, you know, you work on the basis that on a good month, we're doing 30 of those. So I built a significant business just off the back of that. So the cash flow that we're generating from the letting agency, cash flow that we're generating from the deal sourcing, I'm starting to think, you know what, actually, it was the right thing to do to survive.
Yes.
Because without that, would I have gone under? Would I have had the drive and the ambition? I needed that debt hanging over me.
That pressure.
To survive. How many people do you know that go to university that do their dissertation or do an assignment the day before deadline day? Some people perform better under pressure. That's me.
Yeah, and as many people, when there's a deadline or something key that's happening, as you get closer and closer to that point, that's when they just spring into action and just make things happen.
Yeah.
And I said sometimes that pressure that's what's drove you to
correct
to build that.
And so we've been deal sourcing. So off the back of that, we then moved away from sending the text messages to then start sending. We started building significant email marketing database. So we advertising, the more leads that we got, the more money that we're generating, we started to ramp up our advertising. I'll give you an example. We advertised in every funeral directors in the UK. You know, when you go and collect your death certificate and you go to a funeral directors, they give you a little folder, don't they? We were the first thing you saw as soon as you opened that folder. We're sorry to hear about your loss. We understand at this time that things are difficult. Sometimes you may be handed, I can't remember the exact message, but you may have inherited a property or problem that you may not know how to deal with. For no obligation, why don't you give us a quick call and let's have a chat about it, and we'll see if we can find the right solution for you.
Yeah, it's doing a tactful way to say, look, there's a problem, we can have a chat about it. We
were ambulance chasing. There's no way. We were ambulance chasing every step of the way.
The volume of deals happening.
That's it. And we were getting the deals that no one else was seeing. We were liaising with solicitors working on probate cases. We were working with accountants on will cases. The stuff that I was having to go out and do, deal sources today still not aware of. Yes. We were full on marketing mode. And again, it took me back to a level we were spending, you know, circa 100 grand a month in marketing costs.
Wow. And
newspapers,
you're making the money. That's why you
newspapers, football grounds, advertising boards, train stations. We weren't putting on the boards on the lampposts. I didn't want to do that. We were going corporate with all this, and it worked extremely well. You know, and then we went off the back of texting investors now to start emailing investors. And then off the back of that, emailing then took me to the point where we are now. We've got our own app where we've got 50,000 users on this app. So as soon as a deal comes in, it's slightly different because we're not doing as many direct to vendor, because we've got more commercial relationships with lots of agents and people who are bringing us stock almost daily. And we're putting it out on our app and we're selling them to our investors daily. So
how did your strategy start to evolve then? Because back in the day, in the sourcing, that's when I got involved with the sourcing. We're probably doing 2, maybe 3 deals a good month. That's kind of what we were doing at that point, doing some of the traditional kind of direct to vendor marketing. But then over time, 2012, 13, 14, the market started changing slightly, deals started slowing down a little bit. How did you then evolve strategy-wise, what you started to do next?
Because we were buying stock back then as well. So, you know, some of the stock that where we clearly saw it's worth 100,000, we were offering 50,000. We were buying it and we were retaining it. And again, we started to build a portfolio, and it kind of felt like at that point we were going backwards.
Yeah.
Part of me thought, I think we're setting ourselves up here. Here, we've got a business that we've got no assets, we've got no loans, we've got no debt.
Yeah. You're just trading.
We're just trading. The letting agency is a service that has no debt. This has no debt. Just keep going. And so we just kept building. And part of me thought, well, we need to build something for the future. And that's why we start building. And we bought a lot of stock. We're still buying a lot of stock. And some of it with debt. But what we did is we structured a deal with Mike, who then we bolt it on into our existing system. So we're not then going back to the points where we're leveraged at circa 70 or 80%, which lots of investors do. I know that lots of property investors, and I'm not saying it's a bad strategy, where they structure all their finance on a 75% interest only basis. I've been there. I've been at that point. I don't want to be 65 years old looking to come to sell off my portfolio and know that the debt level that I've got today is the same debt level that I took on 25 years ago. Because we don't know, you know, we've both lived now through this thing called 𝗏𝗏𝗁. We know that when we take debt level on over 25 years, the property market's not just going to do that. We've seen that what actually happens is this. And if you're 65 years old and you're down here as opposed to up here, you're in a very difficult position.
You don't know what will happen there.
If anything, if the last 5 years has taught us anything, is expect the unexpected. Within this time frame, what we've done, we've lost the Queen, we've gained a King, we've gone through COVID, we've seen interest rates, we've seen base rate drop to minus, we've seen base rate increase to, you know, circa X amount. We've seen our interest rates now go back to what I would consider the normal rates.
Yeah, 5-6% kind of, that was the norm back in the day.
But now everyone that I speak to, assuming that base rate is going to go back to 0 or 0.25%, never ever going to happen. And it's highly unrealistic.
There were extreme circumstances that led to that happening in the first place.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that we can see in the future that would indicate it could go back to that.
But we can see all kinds of things happening. We've had how many changes of government? We're going into now a new general election. All these things, technically speaking, will happen, make this happen. And this will happen for the next 20 to 25 years.
Carry on.
But whereas I wanted to be in position, regardless what happens there, my debt level comes down there. So even if I am here, my debt level's there, I'm still in a win-win scenario.
Primary objective would be is to get that debt paid right down.
Absolutely.
Keep the portfolio, grow the portfolio, but reduce the debt as you're going along.
And as a result, we constantly acquired properties by utilising multiple different strategies, bought a lot of properties. We've done lots of, let's say, for argument's sake, rent-to-rent deals. We've done lease option deals. We've got commercial to resi deals. We've traded a lot of properties.
So you've evolved strategies-wise as the years have gone on, as the market conditions have changed. You've kind of adapted slightly. with what you're doing rather than sticking to just this is the only way we're going to do it.
100%.
Because you said it's the only certainty is that uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've just had to make sure that we've moved and we've consistently changed and we've moved forward with it. And we've moved with technology as well.
So now we were talking earlier about team and the kind of staff and stuff, and you've kind of changed the structure in terms of how your team and business work. So how do you manage things now on a kind of day-to-day or weekly basis?
So the letting agency, believe it or not, after COVID, I sold my shares out to that. So my brother, we decided to have a bit of a company restructure where he decided to keep the letting agency. I decided to keep the app. But all my lettings all go through the agency. Yeah. I've always been very clear. The one thing that's remained consistent with me is that I wanted to keep my overheads low. And more importantly, I've always wanted to not really have people that I've had to be accountable to. Yeah. And so a lot of my staff, all my staff now, believe it or not, are all remote. So I've got a team of web and app developers who are based in India. I've got a team of deal sourcers that are, believe it or not, based in Pakistan. I've got a team of service accommodation customer representatives and listing team that are based in Pakistan. And we've got a small team of people based in the Philippines. And if you factor in the cost of that team is equivalent to perhaps 2 full-time members of staff in the UK. Wow. And so I've got...
It's literally all kind of done overseas now, more something.
Correct.
We were talking about this just off camera before we started filming. There's so much more now within this business by utilizing technology and people and skills around the world. There's so much more we can do. Yeah. That doesn't have to physically be, we have to be here to do that.
Yeah, and I'm going through some interesting times personally, because we're looking at new ways or new places to live. And that's going to be interesting because that's going to mean that I'm going to be perhaps spending a lot more time out the UK, which is good. But equally, as I said to you before we started, I'm probably busier now than I have been for the last few years. We're currently, and again, having talked about why I like doing interviews like this, it allows me to mind dump and have a quick drive back down memory lane. I'm currently doing a deal with a piece of land in Wolverhampton, and we're having to build out 95 apartments, which kind of goes against everything that we've done back for the last 20 years. But I've structured these differently where I've not taken on any debt, because we've done deals with hedge funds where they're going to fund it from the outset, where it's leveraged against the power of the lease that we're going to be putting in place. And that's, that deal alone is worth circa 20 to 25 million pounds. Okay. That's not factored into my portfolio at the moment. Yes. And, if I walk away with 4 million quid from that deal, I'm not intending on keeping it. Yes. So literally, you walk away with a few million quid from that deal, it's been a deal worth doing. Absolutely. Got a plot of land that we're building some houses on.
So just before we talk about the land, just for clarity for somebody who might be listening or watching this right now. So with that particular site, you've got a partnership with the landowner. Yeah. You'll take it through the planning process, get all the relevant...
Believe it or not, already had planning. So with this deal in particular, it's quite a significant piece of land in Wolverhampton. It's got planning permission for 95 apartments. The current owner just didn't have the appetite to build out because, again, there's parts of the jigsaw that they're missing. Yes. And one thing that I said to you at the start is that property is a jigsaw. Now, give me a jigsaw which has got 5,000 pieces and we don't know where certain bits go. That development is never ever going to complete. Yeah. Whereas what I've done is slowly but surely put all the pieces together. So understand what the land is, understand what the planning is, understand what the conditions of that plans are, understand who's going to be the end user, understand who's going to be the funding partner, understand where we go and all the people in between. So I managed to put all those pieces together to get us to this point where we've got the end valuation based on 20 to 25 million pounds, working on the basis that we've got a 25 to 35 year lease. So there's a couple of things that we still need to tie up on. But
once the lease is in place, so there's a provider that'll commit to taking the whole building.
Correct. So we've got a hedge fund in place.
In terms of lease. So once that lease is pretty much have agreed the value again increases significantly because there'll be income at the end of it. That means you can exit to like a hedge fund is ready to then fund it, take it on.
Correct. So we've already got the hedge fund in place. We've already got...
You're de-risking it for all the people involved.
100%. So would I build this out knowing that I'd have to go off and get circa £10 million worth of debt to build it? No chance. Would I take it on? No, because I'm then taking myself back to 2004 to 2008 where I'm building and I'm becoming a slave to the bank.
Yeah.
So I've always got that etched in the back of my mind. What am I doing? How am I doing? And who's going to win? And just imagine, can you imagine, Saj, building out building out circa 100 odd apartments?
Yeah, not an easy task.
And then not only that, if you've got no end user in mind, trying to sell, circa 100 apartments.
Yeah, in a small town city that you're on definitely an upward hill battle.
You're fighting the battle from the outset. Wouldn't even bother taking it on.
And so when we talk about the complete jigsaw, it's putting these pieces together so the whole thing is much more attractive because you've taken care of all the bits that people might struggle with.
And this is the thing. This site has been sat derelict for 30 years.
Wow.
Now tell me, why has no one seen what I've seen? And this is what kind of drives me. This, I've done deals on pieces of land that no one's been able to touch before. And you think that when you look at some of the names that have looked at this land, you think, why couldn't they deliver this?
Yes.
And I suppose that takes me back to 2008, sat at that boardroom. Why did that guy, Mike, take a bet on me that day? And getting goosebumps. And I've been able to pull together and working with Wolverhampton City Council, put together a scheme that works for everyone. Yeah. We're going to see a site that's been sat there derelict for 30 years come to life. And that's, sounds a bit big-headed, but that's just because of me.
Yes.
I've pulled together all the right people to make this happen.
What gives you the buzz to kind of keep going and wanting to do more deals like this? Especially complex stuff like this. So really might have looked at it and already decided, actually, this is not worth doing.
You've had Sainsbury's look at that site, you've had Waitrose look at that site, you've had Costa look at that site, you've had Starbucks look at that site. Why could they not deliver this? Why has it taken a 43-year-old young, well, I don't call myself young anyway, 43-year young property idiot, let's call myself property idiot, bring this to life? Why could they not do it? They all had the resources. Yes. I just had a different vision for the property. When you see something, you and I would have both looked at that project, we would have come out with two completely different conclusions. Just my conclusion seemed to stack up. Then I had the right people at the back end to make it all happen. Lots of people probably looked at that and thought, 95 apartments, I'm not building 95 apartments, I'm not selling 95 apartments. Yes. I looked at it and thought, okay, 95 apartments, yeah, I understand that part. Do I want to build it and do I want to sell it? No, I don't. Will someone else build it and can we utilise it for another use? Absolutely. And we both, Saj, you and I both quite creative in the space. When we look at a property, we come up with a solution to ensure that it works for all parties. And whether this be something like a rent to rent, whether this be like a lease option, whether this be, there's so many acronyms that we can utilise. Going back, do you mind if I tell you about one more example?
Sure.
Another landmark building in Wolverhampton. This property investor bought this, I don't mind saying it now because I own it. There's a big 16,000 square foot office space in Wolverhampton. They bought it with a view of having the job centre occupy the whole building. The job centre was paying, on average, I think it was $145,000 a year. And they'd been there for the last 25 years.
Right. But their model's changing as well now, isn't it?
So when the company was selling it, the previous owners selling it, they were selling it because there was a break clause for the job centre.
Okay.
And they must have had some insight to think the job centre's leaving.
Yes.
This new company comes and buys it for, I think, £1.5 million, based on the strength of the job centre. What part did they not read?
The break clause, they missed.
They missed the break clause.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, they bought this building. As soon as they own it, guess what? They get a letter from the job centre saying, we're due to exit. Our break clause is this date. We're giving you notice on the date of the break clause. So, guys, here's our notice. 6 months we're off. Now, they bought a £1.5 million building, assuming that it's going to be paying them £145,000 a year for the next 20 odd years.
Yeah.
They didn't read the small break clause, said we can exit. So I saw it go on the market. I watched it. I watched people go in and out. No one could make it work. I said to the agent, I said, guys, get me around the table with the owners. You can be there present. Yeah. Let's negotiate a deal. They go, oh, she goes, everyone's looked at this. No one can make it work. I said, okay, let me have my time with them. I walked in. Have you got a pen, Saj?
Not here.
Okay, fine. I'm going to pretend this is my pen. Walked in, put my pen down on the table. Favourite trick of mine, this is. Use this. This will work for you. Put your pen down on the table. So, guys, I said, tell you what, you bought it for 1.5 million. I'm going to buy it off you for 1.5 million. They're rubbing their hands. Yes, we've got a deal. I said, but you've got to transfer me the building today for 1.5 million, which means that I owe you 1.5 million.
Yeah.
And I will pay you within 3 years, 1.5 million. We're not doing that. I said, guys, all right, I'm off. Literally got up, walked out the door. What did I leave there?
Your pen.
Left my pen there. Always leave my pen on the table. Why, Saj?
You've got an excuse to come back.
I walked down the stairs and I got a call from top of the stairs. Arsh, you forgot your pen. Walk back in the room. Why would we give you that building at 1.5? Why would we loan you 1.5? And we went through the process. I said, within 3 years, I'm going to go off and get planning permission on this building. I'm going to increase the value of this building from 1.5 to 2.5, which means that now I'm not 100% leveraged.
Yes.
But what makes you think you can do this? I said, before I came to this meeting, I've already had the correct conversations. And I can back this up with all the emails. Guess what happened at the end of that meeting? We shook hands, heads of terms, was all agreed. They were going to transfer me the building at £1.5 million. I'm going to have ownership of that building. They're going to have first charge over it. And then I went off and got planning permission for 24 one-bed apartments on the first and second floor, 6 shops on the ground, and also a 20-bed hotel. We've now had valuation to say that that's worth, as it stands, around £2.5 million with the planning permission in place. Going to cost around between 1.5 to 2 million to build. So let's say it's going to cost between 4 to 4.5, but we've then got an end Red Book valuation of the gross development value of £6.5 million.
So there's an option right now you could either just sell,
correct,
pay the previous owners,
correct,
and still walk away with £1 million,
yeah,
or build it out and create more profit.
It'll produce around £600,000 a year in income if I decide to keep it.
Hence the higher end value now.
Correct, yeah. So I mean, but believe it or not, it's easier dealing with deals like this than it actually is Mr. and Mrs. Smith that's got a 2-bedroom terrace house.
Yeah, there's much more emotion involved with the person selling their home,
correct,
than a corporate doing a deal,
correct,
an asset that just sits on the balance sheet.
Correct. So I'm currently working with a family that own quite a large part of Birmingham on a lot of their commercial stock on similar bases.
Yeah. uplift the value through planning.
Yeah. And so again, yes, I've had to spend some money on that building in particular, spent some money on planning permission costs, but because of this style of building and the office space, we've not had to go through the whole process.
Yes.
And
go through a prior approval process rather than full planning permission.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've had to have some conversations, go back and forth. We've had to look at the 106, which we managed to discount to 0. But this all takes time. It all takes headspace. And that's why it's a different kind of pressure, shall we say. But there's no financial pressure there.
Yes, it's a fantastic deal. And those sort of things you're spending more time on?
Spending more time on those. My biggest issue right now, as I said to you outside, is I've probably got too many plates spinning.
Yes.
I've got a service accommodation portfolio of around 100 odd properties all over the country. So we cover Cornwall, Nottingham, Liverpool, Manchester, Wolverhampton, Birmingham, and Blackpool.
Yes.
We've got back Blackpool. We acquired 2 20-bed hotels.
Right.
When I say 20-bed, they're more like a service apartments, as opposed to a standard room where you've got eating and living quarters. We've got rid of all that.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got those. So Blackpool's an interesting place, but it works really well.
Yeah. You get involved in the most interesting things and different projects. Every time we catch up, you're kind of doing something very interesting, very different than maybe the last time we spoke. Yeah,
it is, because again, what I like is the fact that when someone brings me something, I like to have a look at what part of the jigsaw's missing. And generally speaking, if I can plug that last missing piece in and I can see an uplift, that's where I want to, that's where I think I'm probably best placed or best suited. If everything's already in place and I can't really add value to it, I kind of think, what am I doing here?
Yes.
But I suppose, going back to your question, what drives me is the fact that I have this ability to add value or to think slightly outside the box to turn this product into where it is. And that's why I suppose that's what kind of drives the property investor out, the fact that we've created the equivalent to like Rightmove just for property deals. I understand there's lots of other platforms out there, and it is a growing and becoming a more competitive space.
There's a lot more prop tech.
There are lots more prop tech out there. But saying that, there's not just one property platform. If you think of the property market, you've got Rightmove, you've got Zoopla, you've got On the Market, you've got 3 there. Just switch to the 3, and then you've got all the others. So there's lots of space out there.
They all support each other in the sense that they create that market.
Absolutely. And if you thought of it from that point of view, how many property investors are there in the UK? How many of them are actually out there doing deals? So if they're all doing something, there's enough out there for everyone.
Well, actually, it's been a fascinating conversation. We could spend hours and hours talking about this. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us. What's the best way for someone to connect with you?
I'll probably just say the best thing is download the app. So if you go to if you're on your website, you go to propertyinvestораpp.co.uk, or if you've got a smartphone, so if you've got an Apple or Android device, go to the App Store, type in Property Investor, download it from there, and then in there you have the ability to send us a message. If you just say that you've listened to the SAJ or the Big Property Podcast, and if you want to leave your contact details, I'll personally give you a call back.
Excellent. Arsh, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sage. Thanks.